Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Gravity Circuit. In the last route went after Bit, the Shift Circuit, and now it's time for once again our next Rebel Circuit. In this case we're going after the one who's got the big squinty eyes on the top right here. It appears our coolant pipelines from the mountains have been cut off. Normally I would send some technicians to repair them, but the Rebel Circuit Blade has been spotted flying over the area. He and his terrifyingly cool powers make it hard to approach the pipes directly. Luckily for us, there is an alternate path through the mountains. However, it's swarming with virus army troops, so go out there and help us clear a path to restoring those lines. And while you're at it, could you grab some ice along the way? My servos could use some cooling. Take on this mission? Very well. Prepare for transfer. This level's pretty cool. Low effort pun, completely intentional. But it also has a puppy! Hello, puppy. Yay. We got a lot of the usual ice level trappings in here. We got icicles that can fall down and hit you. They don't count as spikes, but they do hurt pretty well. We have slippery physics in some sections. We got ice blocks we can shatter. Probably the most annoying ice mechanic here is that there are enemies in a lot of the vertical screens in this stage that are buried in the wall. They're effectively cannons. But they shoot out a chilled air burst ahead of them that will completely freeze you and you'll fall down and take some extra damage from the spikes likely below you. It's sort of like the purple goop from Trace's stage, except not. In fact, there's the first one right there. They don't have a lot of health, but they're usually placed in such tight corridors that if you're just trying to rush past them, you're probably going to take a shot or two, which you can alleviate by taking them out, but sometimes you just don't feel like doing that. Otherwise, though, we got these propeller platforms. The way they work is that whenever you're standing on top of them, they fall down. So the strategy there is just doing a lot of short hops over spikes to get past things, including to get to this pallet ship in specific. One other thing this stage has in specific, though, that are also in a couple of other stages, but this is, I think, the first time we're seeing them in a way I can actually talk about them, are floating proximity mines. You get too close to them, they start making a sound, and they explode a few seconds later. You can grab them and throw them, but what they're actually very useful for in some rooms is that if you're good about jumping and doing the dive kick correctly, you can jump from one to the next and just completely ignore some platforming sections. In fact, I think there's at least a hostage or a power-up in this stage that requires that directly. The explosion is pretty large, so watch out for that, but as long as you're not trying to face tank damage along the way, they're not going to be that big of a problem. Now, to touch upon something we talked about last time I talked about a lot of the game's main development staff contributors. There's one category from the main devs left to talk about, and that's the feedback and playtesting group, who are Geistbox, who I believe is at Geistbox on Twitter, John Witch, Enoch Gilson, and Frederick Knight. This is all of their first entries on Moby Games, so they're not exactly story developers, but worth bringing them up all the same, considering they probably had to do a lot of stuff for this game in specific, given all the individual techniques you can use and all that. After that, though, there's a lot of other people listed in the credits, which are namely the publishing staff at PID Games, as well as Plug-in Digital. There's the localization staff at Roboto Global, the QA assurance at Copenhagen Production, some tech from love2d.org, as well as a very in-depth special thanks section, but we'll go more into those as we go throughout the LP. For now, something I actually want to talk about. Each of the names of the Rebel Circuits is actually a reference to some form of computer technology by and large. Kai's name isn't so much just because main character syndrome, so to speak. But for instance, Ray, the first boss we went after, is named after the laser ray within disk drives, hence the optic circuit subtitle as well. While Trace is named after traceback, which I believe is a term used in some form of debugging when it comes to the way memory flows in programs in some way, and that's also partially why she's named the patch circuit, because of computer patching. Crash, his name is, I think, pretty straightforward, a computer or program crash. While his title as the break circuit, I believe, is a reference to both a programming term, but also like HTML type stuff, I want to say. Hash is named after hash tables, while his title as the cipher circuit comes from code ciphers. By the way, all this information is from directly Domesticated Ant Games, the main developer studio of the game. Bit is, again, pretty straightforward. Bit shifting, which is another programming concept. It's also why he's named the shift circuit. While Blade, the boss of this stage, is named after the fan of a CPU cooler, so his name is the cooler circuit. Besides the fact that, you know, he's just pretty cool looking. And we'll save the origins, the names of the final two Rebel circuits for when we actually reach them. So another mechanic this stage has is wind platforming. Thankfully, it's by and large just vertical, but you do have to keep in mind that it will influence your jumps both upwards and downwards. So watch out if you're trying to rush through it, because you might end up taking some extra hazard damage, and that just mean you might take an extra death or two along the way. I'd say the hardest part with the wind platforming here is getting that specific hostage I just got, because jumping from up there can be deceiving, but you just have to run off of it. To the point where I think when I did a stream of this when I first played the game, I think I didn't get that particular hostage because I was just a little tired to begin with, for one thing, but just didn't feel like messing around with it to an extent. I was just trying to play through the game, not worrying about 100% as much. Because that is a different mindset I have on the stream side of things, where I will not try to 100% things on stream as much as I think that makes for a radically different atmosphere over on a live setting than it does in a recorded setting. This is what I was talking about dive kicking those things, by the way. That looks pretty tight. It's a little more generous with the timing than you'd think, but you need to make sure you're careful, though, because if you have the exact pell chip on that I do, if you hold that button for too long, you will activate the laser. And while that might help you get a little bit more across the screen horizontally, you're more likely to fall into the pit doing that, so you should just tap it very ever so slightly. Because the amount of time it takes for the laser to kick in is fast enough that it can actually be dangerous in rooms like that, as few as they are. Now, I've yet to get every achievement in the game. If there is one achievement that scares me more than most of the others, in terms of at least the ones that are like beat a stage a certain way ones, it's the one for this stage, actually. Which is to beat it without getting frozen by one of the ice projectile enemies. The timing on getting past them or destroying them without getting hit seems tight enough in some of the vertical sections that it just seems like it would be a nightmare. Mind you, it is one of those that'll probably be easier when I'm actively attempting to do it rather than just trying to do it along the way. Because if you're just trying to do things along the way in a game like this, it can seem a lot more intimidating than just trying to do it directly. A good example of this is actually some of the trophy hunts I've done. There's some trophies that you really shouldn't do while trying to do others, because it'll just overcomplicate the process. Hell, I think I've talked about on basically every one of the 3 Shovel Knight campaigns I've done at this point in time on LP. But I platinumed Shovel of Hope. One of the worst things I ever did while trophy hunting was doing the New Game Plus trophy in that game, which is a double damage mode, deathless while breaking every checkpoint, because that's 3 different trophies. Not my smartest idea. I would not recommend playing a game like that. I would just say do deathless as a separate run and play it super safe. Because New Game Plus in Shovel Knight does not mess around with the damage output. Speaking of which, actually, this game does have difficulty options. By and large, the main things it changes are, to my memory, bosses and enemies have more HP, you take more damage. I think enemies in general are faster, and with boss fights, if there's a possibility for an attack to have a harder variation, I think by default it uses that, and they use their attacks more often. Like, I think Bit in specific can do several more dashes in a row. I think he'll always do more slashes across the screen if he can. And just generally the timing is tighter. I think easy is probably the inverse off the top of my head. Less HP for enemies, you take less damage, blah, blah, blah. If you're going for trophies, hard modes, I think a one-stop shop for that, where you can get that and the normal beating the game trophy all at once, which is how games should do it. If they do it the other way, where you need to clear every difficulty individually, they're doing it wrong. Now, I do need to, at some point, check out the Master levels playthrough at some point, because I've seen, like, the intro stages at least, where they add a lot more bottomless pits for you to swing around and all that. Because I'm very curious how much more they push these mechanics to their limit. For instance, something that you can do with these platforms, that you only need to do to get one hostage coming up right here, you can grapple into them to drag them down further to then get on top of them. And I think there could be some more interesting setups with that, but you only need to do it the twice right here. And I'm wondering if maybe potentially the master level version of the Blade stage just does more with that. And I'm gonna need to check that out at some point. Maybe do it on stream or something. But that's for then. This is now. And speaking of now, we're just about to reach where the boss fight is. Now, if you haven't been using it, I do recommend especially putting on the one enhancement chip that makes you get dragged to your grappling hook targets for this fight. If only because there's some situations where it might be able to save you from taking some excess hazard damage. But we'll talk more about why once we're actively in the boss fight. Also, it's largely the color palette on top of it being, you know, an ice level. But this specific room does remind me a lot of Freeze Man's boss room from Mega Man 7.
Why, if it isn't the Gravity Circuit himself barging in. To what do I owe this honor?
The pipes, Blade. We can't let the city's reactors overheat.
And what if I don't let you touch them?
I think you already know the answer to that one.
That's awfully cold of you.
You have changed.
But if that's how you want to treat your former comrade, I'll return the favor in kind. Perhaps permafrost suits you better anyway.
So given his rotary blade on the back, Blade of course spends most of the fight in midair. He can send arcs of icicles down at you, he can send 2 specific icicles that will travel to either side of him away from himself, and he can also just charge at you directly from above. But easily his most dangerous attack is his burst technique, which in this case is Freezing Cycle. This is effectively Storm Hold, or Tornado Hold from Mega Man 8. He's gonna cycle back and forth across the stage trying to knock you off of it, and you get pretty close to getting hit by him no matter what. You need to stand at the exact edge of the platform and maybe even jump away from him to avoid it. Afterwards, though, he actually will increase the amount of icicles he sends out at any given time. He's pretty fast to take out, but watch out because he can cover a lot of ground very quickly.
We should have known better. Not to not trust you.
What are you saying?
Don't stress your servos over it. You'll find out soon enough.
As you can see, though, to the left and right of that particular boss fight is a bottomless pit, and that's why I recommend having the particular chip that'll pull you towards the enemy you grapple, because in the case you jump too far, that could be a saving grace between taking hazard damage. That stage, though, not too bad. Getting frozen's annoying, but overall, it's pretty quick.
Commander, the circuits...
Colonel, sir? You're doing that thing again. Should I call the medic? I'm fine. Just a little shaken by the recent events, that's all. But keep this just between the two of us. But, sir, looks like it could be serious.
Pat, are you disobeying my order?
No, sir. Understood, sir. Man, we just barely missed that, huh? Good work out there. That should restore our coolant supply. Too bad you didn't bring any ice with you, but I'll manage. Let me know when you're ready to tackle the next mission. Instead, we'll be tackling the shops once again. Blade's pallet chip is actually one I used a lot in the endgame of my first playthrough. It gives you effectively an air slide out of a certain Mega Man ROM hack where you can now just dash and slide in midair. Great for horizontal distance, but not as good as my favorite from Ray's stage. Notably, I actually haven't talked about it too much. You do have a slide in this game just like Mega Man. It has its own button it's mapped to, but you can also just press down on the jump button to do it. Next up from the nurse, I'm getting the light alloy enhancement chip, which if you hold the jump button while falling, your falling speed will reduce. I'm not sure if that can stack with the laser to let you go further with it. I'll have to test that out and come back to you with that in post. I'm getting the magnet chassis, which auto picks up drops from enemies and chests alike, so you don't have to worry about picking them up yourself. And the catch block, which just outright removes knockback when you get hit. That one feels like it should be more useful than it actually is, though.
Ah, you've been busy. I heard you confronted the cooler circuit.
Blade always was a bit of a vindictive type, holding on to petty grudges. He'd make enemies with just about everyone, even when he was in the wrong. As such, he'd often spend his time up in the skies by himself. Of course, this made it a bit hard to get a hold of him. However, when he was truly needed, he always came around, even if he tended to show up at the very last minute. Oh, I think that's enough reminiscing about the past. Blade's burst techniques are very defensive. First off, there's the gravity freeze, which will stop enemies that are nearby you for a short time. But then there's support platform. Support platform is effectively item 2 for Mega Man 2. You just make a platform you can jump off of. Dog. But if you press the burst button near the dog, you can pet the dog. That's not only how you get their character chip, that also will get you an achievement. How do you do, Gravity Circuit? Seems like you've still got your work cut out for you, but when was the last time you had the time to rest your servos? If you'd like, you can join me and relax a bit. It's the least I can do after you save me. If you press the burst button near her, which I didn't do earlier, you take a little rest. And that will get you her character chip. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 8, get this, more Rebel Circuits. See you guys then!